Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in with a video about Kenja no Mago, a new series premiering during spring 2019. This is going to be a discussion video talking about a particular story trope that appears in Kenja no Mago. If you are the kind of person that likes hearing other people talk about shows that you enjoy, then yeah, this might be the video for you. The topic for this video is how Kenja no Mago justifies the lack of common sense in its main character. Now, if you are in a hurry, here is the quick and simple answer. It justifies the lack of common sense by introducing a character that is extraordinarily, well, how do you even say that, extraordinarily not normal, and uses his way of life as a justification for why the main character has no common sense. It requires a very extraordinary character to be able to pull it off. That's how Kenja no Mago justifies the lack of common sense in that regard. Okay, cool. Now that was a short answer. It's all because of a character. Let's get into the longer answer. So, Kenja no Mago is another series in the isekai or in another world species of stories. You know the ones like Slime or Shield Hero. Like you know the ones. People just end up somewhere they don't belong. Anyway, a big trope that occurs in a subspecies of isekai stories is that characters don't know how the world works. The ones that come into the world, they have no idea. In other words, they don't know the common sense of the land. There's a couple of reasons as to why this can be useful in these stories. First one is audience surrogacy. If the main character doesn't know about the world, it's easier for the audience to climb into the shoes of the character and discover the world together with the character. In most cases, the first time the character encounters something big, it's the first time the audience encounters something big. It really helps to relate to the character and their lack of knowledge if it's executed well. A second smaller advantage is that it makes storytelling easier. It becomes easier to justify certain things if you use character doesn't know about it as an excuse. For instance, I'll use something that's currently unfolding in Shield Hero. Mind you, spoilers, try to be clear. Naofumi doesn't know about the socio-political climate of the country he is in. Well, he doesn't have a full picture of it. As it turns out, there's a pretty big group that actively hates him, but you don't run into the critical terminology that would give it away until, well, around or beyond episode 12. And heck, you wouldn't even have a hint that there was an organized group until around episode 10. The thing here is this hate group was common knowledge to the world. The members are quite literally everywhere in this particular country. But now Fumi doesn't get hints to it until their arc comes along. By having a character that lacks common sense, it's easier to justify why certain very present details didn't pop up earlier, with the excuse being the character didn't know or the character didn't know to ask. In Naofumi's case, he even asks why no one told him such an obvious fact, and when he got his answer, it was one, his party member thought he already knew given that it was common knowledge, and the other, their ally didn't tell Naofumi because he didn't want to hurt the guy's feelings. Now personally, I don't think these are strong justifications. There was the critical terminology that people could have been uttering from the very first episode, but they weren't doing it. But hey, the author has set up such a situation that it could be justified. Anyway, I digress. This is about Kenja no Mago. Also, Kenja no Mago also translates to Magi's grandson, so I'm gonna switch to that just because it's easier. I realized I've already recorded the video, so I'm just gonna go to Magi's grandson. So Magi's grandson, or I think Magi's grandson, also takes advantage of the lack of common sense trope. But there's a few wrinkles as to how it implements it. One is that it arguably uses the trope more for humor than it does for plot happenings, and another bigger one is that Magi's grandson is not the same subspecies of isekai in that the main character of Magi, Shin, isn't just transported into another world, he is reincarnated into it. He's in that world as a baby and grows up in the world, but he doesn't know the common sense of the world even though he should. This implementation of the trope becomes more interesting because it throws the focus onto Shin's grandfather, the one who raised him and the one who didn't teach him common sense. It's his fault, all his fault, but that's funny. Come on, like how is it not? He's even supposed to be a wise man and he doesn't even teach them the basics of common sense. Anyway, this implementation leads into some pretty funny justifications, and in order to make it work, the idea of a wise man not teaching a child basics, Magi's grandson has to make the grandfather extreme in some areas. And because of that, we end up with a grandfather who is an extraordinarily powerful war hero who also happens to live in a cottage in very secluded woods, who gets visited by his friends every now and again and doesn't leave the woods with Shin for 15 years, and to top it all off, just wants to see how much power Shin can amass by teaching him very complicated things, we would assume. That's how far Magi's grandson goes to make this trope work. And it works because the end results, well, they lead to some funny gags. The implementation of this trope also allows us to take advantage of the general advantages to some degree, like audience surrogacy. We see the world as Shin sees it. When he leaves the forest, we are seeing the world for the first time along with him. We learn things as Shin does. Oh, your uncle is actually the king? Wow! I'm surprised as you are, Shin. Wow, you got trained by a knight commander? Yeah. Color me surprised, just like you. What? Your grandparents were once married? I'm as floored as you are, man. Though I think it's kinda silly you never asked. It's been 15 years, that's kinda silly. And now, when Shin needs to learn something, he can ask and be told without making the dialogue weird or redundant. Because, you know, when you're first having a introductory episode to a series, there's usually a lot of stinted dialogue that's specifically there to get extra exposition out of it. Anyway, Shin himself probably still won't understand just how special he is, and that'll be a trait throughout this anime. But yeah, I found this implementation to be very clever, and I found it to be one of the more funny implementations of this trope. And just one last thing I wanted to point out, the implementation of this trope also strengthens or allows some of the other common isekai tropes, like making an overpowered character. The implementation of this one allows for that to happen easier, but we'll probably save that for another time. We're pretty much at the end of the video. Anyway, I find it funny that the story did so much to justify having Shin become so powerful while also not knowing about the world despite living in it. And honestly, I find it to be a really solid justification for why this character doesn't have common sense. If anyone was watching Slime, just to like also throw that in there, Slime's implementation was similar to, well, Slime's implementation was also kind of clever in that Rimura was reincarnated into the world but came in as a slime and was locked in a cave. So it makes sense for him not to understand things about the world. I mean, he was in a cave. What are you going to learn in a cave, right? But that's not about this. We're done. The video is over now. We are now at the end screen. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed a little discussion, kind of analysis of a story trope. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know down below by hitting the like button or subscribing. I feel like my soul is being torn apart slowly while I say that, but I have to say it because YouTube's being weird. Anyway, not the point. Point is, you know, I wanted to make this video because the isekais all do little things to try and differentiate themselves from each other, and it's cool to point out what the authors come up with. Anyway, like I said, let me know what you thought down below. Until next time, I hope you have an absolutely good day.